Verse 15, then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him, Jesus, in what he said. So they sent the disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax. And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, Whose head is this, and whose title? They answered, The emperor's. Then he said, Give, therefore, to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's. When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
All right, so we've got this story, which I think is really about allegiance. The Herodians were loyal to Herod, right? That's where the name comes from, Herodians. And then you've got the Pharisees, who were the protectors of the law. This is how you must be if you're going to be religious. And they normally wouldn't be on the same side, but when Jesus came around, there were strange bedfellows made. So these antagonists become teammates in trying to bring down Jesus. And they know that Jesus' audience has been listening pretty hard. He's got this crowd of people, many of whom are oppressed. We're having a terrible time trying to pay their taxes because they're so high, they're beyond the living, what they could do to live. Basically, more money than they could bring in to live are going out to taxes, and so they get more and more enslaved to the Roman Empire. So their life is hard. And they're listening to what Jesus said. And Jesus has said some things that make them sound like they matter. And now they want to know, do we pay the taxes? The Pharisees say, do you pay taxes? And if Jesus says yes, of course, well then all his little audience of people who are upset with Rome say, I knew he wasn't really for us. He's going to have us be oppressed even more by saying we have to pay taxes. But if he says, no, you don't pay taxes, then the Herodians get to go back and report, just as we suspected, this guy's an insurrectionist. He's here to bring down the Roman Empire. We need to arrest him today. So they think they've got Jesus caught in a trap. Well, Jesus, who knows his accusers and what they're about, asks in the temple, show me a coin. Now, the Pharisees, right, the keepers of the law, know the coin, that they're not supposed to have anything with a graven image on it, right? That is one of the key laws, the Ten Commandments, no graven images. Jesus says, in the temple, let me see a coin. Out of their pocket, right to Jesus. A graven image in the temple. Whose image is on this coin? Well, it's the emperor's. The emperor's graven image in the temple, out of the pocket of the Pharisees. And not only that, on that coin, inscribed on that coin is Divine Augustus' father. They've got a coin that's engraved with our Caesar is God. And these are the ones who are trying to catch Jesus for messing up religion. So he's got them trapped even before he says a word. He's returned the favor. But he says, kindly, give to Caesar what's Caesar's. And then he adds, and give to God what belongs to God. Now my thinking is, if we're made in the image of God, then we belong to God. Caesar can have his little imprinted coin. That's what he deserves. God's imprinted himself on you. That's what God deserves. He's taken a minor thing a little insignificant thing when it comes down to it, a coin, and said, great, let Caesar enjoy those. But what really matters is you. Let God have that. John Wesley was not impressed by people who were proud of their 10% tithes. He didn't think it was a great deal when someone had given 10% to God, if it meant in their minds that they had 90% for them. To John Wesley, it was 100% God's. It all belonged to God. And the faithful way was to sort out how much God has provided for us to live and how much has God provided us to minister. I think it's not just our pocketbooks that applies to. How much has God given us that God expects back? Well, give to God what's God's. Tell me what isn't God's. Give to God what's God's. Now you try to figure out what doesn't belong to God. I think Jesus is saying it's His. You're His. It all belongs to God. There's an email that goes around, you've probably read it before, about a child who comes to the door to greet the preacher after the service. He goes up to shake the hand, and everybody's sort of standing around, because everybody knows that this is a child whose father has never been in the child's life, what some people call it illegitimate. So the preacher says, boy, I've seen you come around here lately, and I've been trying to figure out whose boy you are. And everybody goes silent. You can feel the tension in the air because they're not sure how the boy is going to respond if the preacher knows what he's talking about. Before the boy hangs his head, before he can say anything, the preacher says, but I've figured out whose boy you are. You're a child of God's. You belong to the Father. You're a child of God's. You're a child of God's. You're a child of God's. You belong to the Father. Deborah has brainwashed our children. So if you go to their Sunday school class and say, I'm Will, they've been trained to say, I'm Ellen, child of God. But that's part of their name. Just as much as Ellen is their name. Child of God. I thought since we're doing things different in the other service, we might as well do some things different in here. I'm going to ask you some questions that aren't actually rhetorical. I want you to turn to your neighbor, and I'm going to give you questions that I want you to actually talk about. When you hear, you are made in God's image, you are a child of God, how do you react? When I say to you, you are made in God's image, you are a child of God, what thoughts and emotions come to you? Talk amongst yourselves. One of the things I heard while you were talking was that responsibility comes with that. So there's a blessing and a joy in recognizing that we're children of God. It can be, depending on where we are in life, it may be that we are having a hard time accepting that we're children of God. Made in God's image, that may be something that we have a challenge with. But when we get to a place where we say, okay, I'll try that on, we start to feel the pain or the heaviness of that responsibility. Okay, as a child of God, how am I going to reflect this one whose image I'm made in? How will I be the spirit and image of God? And I think one of the reasons that becomes a challenge is we have been, I don't want to say talked to, but it has become part of our habit to compartmentalize life. This is my work way of being. This is my business side of me. This is how I play. And this is how I do religion. We put things in their own little buckets. I'm school this way. I'm church this way. So what is it? Again, this isn't rhetorical. You and your neighbors discuss. What is it that encourages us, pushes us, causes us to compartmentalize life? Religion life, school life, work life, play life in different buckets. What pushes us to do that? I want to respond to Tim a little bit more. It's so important that we don't just think I'm made in the image of God. I mean, we need to know God has made me, each of you, in God's image. But if we stop there, it's not fully reflecting what God's teaching us there. So it's not enough to say I am. We have to also realize you are. And until we start living out that you are made in God's image, it's really going to be difficult for people to notice that we believe that to be the case. So thank you for pointing that out. Any other comments about what it's like to be challenged or inspired by the reality, the truth that you are made in God's image?
I think challenge and inspiration are both the same,
Okay.
because without the challenge, you wouldn't be inspired.
Good. So, what belongs to God? Including you.
and me.
Right. So Caesar can have the coin. Sometimes we feel like Caesar wants a little more than we want to give. But Caesar can't have you. Caesar cannot have you. The emperor cannot have you. You belong to God, not to your boss, not to this world, not even to yourself. You belong to God.